So I'm interviewing Catherine Maxwell, a longtime owner of Maxwell Money Management, who told me recently she is living the entrepreneur's dream. And of course, the entrepreneur's dream includes selling your business for a bucket full of money and then going off sailing into the Pacific. And that's exactly what she's done.
Drinking wine.
And drinking wine. So I've asked her to just tell us a little bit about what has allowed you to get your business to the point where you could sell it, because this is something that everybody wants to do, but a lot of them, a lot of business owners don't seem to think that they can ever do it. So here you've done it. So just tell us what you've done.
Okay. Well, this is not a plug necessarily, but it is a plug. The smartest thing I ever did was meet you and join the business group, because it kept me on track for things that I knew were going to be the right things to do, and reinforced what those right things were. So a few of them were, I always ran my business like a business. I didn't run it like a hobby. So I took my compensation very seriously. I took my ratios very seriously, and I held it as it was something separate from me. It wasn't my hobby, it wasn't what I did at night, it was what I did for a living, and I always knew it was my retirement plan, and I took it that seriously. So that made a big difference in my relationship with the business and what I expected it to do for me.
Mm-hmm. So one of my sermons has been pay yourself first.
Yep.
And you seem to have taken that very seriously.
I took it very seriously, and even in our most recent recession, over 30 years in business, I've been through many recessions, but the latest one was the deepest, of course, and I adjusted the numbers. I adjusted everything within the business so that I could continue showing a small profit and getting paid. And those were my two key criteria. As my revenue went down, I made adjustments. As my revenue went up, I made adjustments in a good direction. Revenue goes down, I make adjustments in a not so pleasant direction. But I made adjustments because I was always committed to having profit and to being paid.
So you started out as a small business. I don't know, when you started, how many people did you have?
I had none. I started on my own.
Okay, all right. And so you've built up over time.
Yeah.
But you've, one of the things that business owners often do is fail to hand off things effectively. And so there's a bit of a control freak in many of us business owners. And so it becomes difficult for us to bring in and train and trust somebody who really can step up and take over a major role in our business. You seem to have done that very well. So say a little bit about that part.
That was one of the big challenges for me, honestly, and I met you at exactly the right time, because you really were my guide in the mantra you gave me, which was promote yourself to CEO. And I held that as my mantra, and I knew that if I was going to be successful in doing that, I had to turn over some things to other people. So I groomed a longtime employee, someone who'd been with me for about 20 years. I started planting the manager seed in her and groomed her, because she already knew me, she already knew my business, and she was able to step into a managerial role over time, and I was able to start releasing things to her, which, then I would release a little bit at a time and say, oh, that worked out pretty well. Okay, maybe I can release a little bit more. So it's kind of a muscle you develop. When you're first an entrepreneur, you are accustomed to doing everything yourself, and you think you have to do it, and you're the only one who knows how to do it. And, so that's the muscle you develop. But if you start handing things off, now I can barely even do anything, because all I'm good for is handing things off and delegating.
So one of my slogans is, the more you can let go, the more you can grow.
Yeah.
And you've done a good job of that. But it wasn't easy, because you like to have it be just right.
Well, it wasn't only that. One of the hardest things for me was that the tasks that I used to perform were the way that I measured my value. So if I got a lot of things done during the day, if I billed a lot to our clients, then I knew that I was valuable. That was the measure of value. So when I stopped being a production person and became a management person, I had to, in the beginning especially, I didn't have any measurements of value for what I did. You know, I could sell some new clients and I could bring in new business. That was always a good measurement of my value. But beyond that, the visionary part of growing a business, the oversight part, the sniff test, the being the one who knows everything and can guide the ship, it's really hard to pinpoint what the value of that is when you're brand new in it
Right.
and learning it in the beginning. So that was the hardest part for me, is struggling through a period where in which I knew that was what I had to do, but I didn't feel very valuable day after day after day.
So that's the kind of the uncomfortable side of promoting yourself to CEO is, well, do they really need me here
Right,
anymore?
what am I good for?
Right.
And are my employees going to find out I'm really
That's
not
right,
doing
that's
anything
right.
very valuable?
Right. So you didn't have the straight upward track. You had some people that you brought in that didn't really work out. I'm thinking of some particular marketing people who will not be named. Uh, so what did you find out about business growth and growing the business and having that role?
Well, I learned that I needed some training. You know, when you're an entrepreneur, you think you can just grow yourself into just about anything because you know the business. You know what's best for the business. You know the product. You know what you deliver. And that wasn't true of management, because management was very different from the skill set that I developed. And that was the reason I became an entrepreneur, because I had that skill set.
Right.
So management was one that I didn't naturally have as I did the other. And I had to reach out for some help and reach out for some training and learn where I was making mistakes. Hiring the first salesperson that I hired, big mistake. I didn't know how to manage a salesperson.
Right.
And so I let her do whatever she wanted to do. She was good at pulling the wool over my eyes. And not that she did that in any malicious way, but I just didn't have a clue as to how to manage someone like that.
And now one of the things that I see is that there's this, nobody wants to be called a salesperson. They want to be called a marketing rep because it's more highfalutin, sounds better. And so you hire somebody from marketing rep, and what do? Well, they do marketing. Well, marketing, of course, is everything you do that leads up to selling, but it actually doesn't bring you any money in. So you can have a lot of marketing done without making any money. And I think you had
That was one of those important lessons
Yes,
I learned.
That's right.
I got lots of business development out of that relationship, but no sales.
Right. So you had, you trained a manager, and you've actually had different managers, but then you've brought in somebody from the outside who actually was a very strong, kind of more of a general manager for the whole operations.
I did, yeah. Thanks to you. Again, thanks to you. Well, what enabled us to do that is I systematized my business a long time ago. So I always knew, and you reinforced it, that if I was ever going to turn anything over to anyone else, it had to have a procedure that went with it. It couldn't all be in my head. So I took systemization very seriously. And when I found the really high-end general manager that I hired before my last one retired, she was able to come in and take systems and say, oh, I get this. I can learn this quickly because there are systems. I believe in those systems, and I will follow those systems. So the new owners of the business bought it partially because it had systems.
Yes.
It had clients, obviously, clients and revenue, but it had repeatable systems, and it had things that function without me. Probably 90% of the business functions without me, and they knew that based on that fact and the fact that the management was in place, employees were in place, clients were in place, and systems were in place, they had a business that they could work their way into learning without too much loss and without too much of a big downward spiral.
Right.
And that was a lot of the value, I believe.
One of the, I often hear business owners say, I'm going to sell in 5 years. And then you ask them a year later and say, yep, I'm going to sell in 5 years. a year later, yep, I'm going to sell in 5 years. And so it's
That's what
always
they call the
5 years away.
35-year, 5-year plan.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So you amazed us all by actually saying, "Yep, it's going to be
By
4
actually
years.
doing
Yep,
it.
it's going to be 3 years." You know, got down and now along this way, you had actually several offers. Different people or different companies offered to acquire you, and you know, some of them you just you saw that they weren't right for you. So say a little bit about that.
Well, I think everybody has a different exit strategy. Mine was an exit strategy. I knew that I had an end game and that I wanted to be complete with what I was doing, not merely have someone else own it and then continue to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So the couple of the original offers were really job offers.
Mm-hmm.
Tell you what we'll do. We'll acquire your business. We'll take all your clients and all your revenue, and we'll give you a salary
Right,
for a
right,
period
right.
of time. And I really wasn't looking to go work for someone else. I also found that I felt that I had to have the right match for my clients if they were going to stay with the new firm, and I had to have the right match for my employees, who I care about very deeply.
Right.
So the offers that I turned down just weren't the right mix for me first, for the clients and the employees. It wouldn't have been a successful arrangement, so why bother going into it?
So what have you learned? I mean, I know that the sale has only been completed recently. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced in kind of consummating the sale?
Honestly, this was a dream come true sale. Because I prepared so well for it. Back in 2008, before the recession started, I had my business valued by a professional company. So I had a valuation that said, yes, this is worth something. And then I spent the next 3 years, recession or no recession, preparing my business for someone else to be able to run it without me, which included addressing who's going to do the sales, who's going to manage the people, who's going to, I took my entire list of things that I thought only I could do,
Right.
and I started assigning them to other people. So first I found out I wasn't the only one who could do things. Other people really could do things, that I wasn't indispensable, which was fine, because at that point I was ready to be dispensable. But I had never applied it to myself. I had only applied it to other people.
So I want to underline what you just said, because I find a lot of business owners do this very poorly. One, they don't really even have an understanding of what it is that they bring to the business that they think that only they can do. So if you don't know what you do, you can't write it down so that you can delegate it to other people. So it's that awareness of what you do that is special, and then it's not so special that somebody else can't do it, is a very strong transition.
Yeah, that's kind of a balance of, you have to be willing to let go, and then you have to actually let go and let someone else make mistakes
Right.
in their learning process. You kind of watch them and guide them so they don't make too big of mistakes, but you have to allow them to stumble too if they're going to be successful and learn anything, or you're just stuck forever doing all the jobs.
Right. Right.
And that's a sure way to, an early heart attack instead of a great retirement.
Or working away until you're 75 or 80 years
Yeah.
old.
If you're going to do that, you better be having a good time.
That's right. That's right. So, any final things you would like to say, or advice you would give to somebody else coming along that's doing their 5-year track?
Make sure your 5-year track is real. Be willing to sacrifice anything to achieve it. I was willing to walk away, to send all my clients their stuff back and say, I'm retiring in order to meet my goal. And so as a result, I think that my resolve was so firm and immovable that everything else just had no choice but to line up behind it. And it all did. So that was a big part of it. But, just take all the components of what I've said so far and get yourself out of the rat race. Step back from your business and find out what it can do for you, rather than having it be all about what you can do for it.
Right. Good. And so, what are you going to do now with your quote retirement? No, your idle time.
Well, I'm helping the new owners get adjusted right now, and that's going really well. They're fabulous people. Next year, my husband and I will be leaving to take our sailboat to Mexico and to do some extended sailing somewhere in Mexico, perhaps across the South Pacific and going as far as Australia or New Zealand.
Doesn't sound too bad. All right, so
And thank you for everything you've done, Mike. It's being in the business group honestly was exactly the right kind of support for me in being able to accomplish the goal that I accomplished.
well, my joy comes from working with people like you. I'm gonna,
May you have more like
yeah,
this.
well, miss you when you're off in Australia.
I know.